has been kind of a lifelong problem for me. Although I played the piano well enough to win all the local competitions, I was basically, you know, like most people that are at that level, practicing 8 hours a day, which is what you're supposed to do during the summertime at least. And that's of course when everybody else was out there, you know, playing basketball and baseball and everything. So I always played basketball like a guy that practiced the piano 8 hours a day, which didn't make me any more popular, and it certainly didn't get any dates with cheerleaders. So that was a problem that I always dealt with. But somehow I got into the Juilliard school, and I had you know, a sense that I wasn't at the top. I mean, you know, if you tuned in and heard some Chopin on the radio, you know, is it Correnti or Horowitz? I mean, that really wasn't an issue. I mean, you could tell the difference, right? So I figured I wasn't in quite an international class, but when you're at Juilliard, you discover indeed whether you are or not. And a couple of you I've shared, you know, classmates like Emanuel Axe, Garrick Olson, Pinky Zuckerman, Itzhak Perlman. There was this pianist, Jimmy Levine, that was running around. He spent a lot of time with singers. And then it turned out he was James Levine later on. Jerry Schwartz, not a bad trumpeter, but you know. So I mean, this is what you had at the school. And so the general sense that maybe I'm not in the international class was really specified very quickly. And then very much clarified by my teacher, who kind of taught by insult. And it had, within a year or so, totally destroyed any sense that I had that I could do anything of value. I was so ashamed of my playing. I wouldn't even play for my parents when I went home. I practiced if the door was closed when I went back home on the weekend. But as far as sitting down and playing for them, I couldn't bear the thought that there was anything I had to offer. So that's really what led to the initial crisis, which ultimately led to my conversion. So I can say that's one of the great benefits of this whole mess, that I had to really come to grips with who am I and why am I here and what's life about and what's really important. And then I got this was my senior year, and there was a little revival on campus. About a dozen of us were converted. It was quite an amazing thing. A bunch of my friends were trotting off to Philadelphia to go to this place called seminary. And I said, what's that? And they said, well, you learn about the Bible. I said, really? That's what I need. So I appointed myself a seminarian and went to Philadelphia. And much to my surprise, after I thought about call to ministry, I ended up pastoring an urban church for 28 years. So, you know, the Lord had a real roundabout way of pointing me in another direction. But thankfully I knew him, but it was like being saved from drowning, and I woke up and I was on a different beach because, you know, I was in a church and people didn't know. You know, I mean, in my senior recital, I did Cesar Franck and Alexander Scriabin, and people didn't know who those people were. You know, and so learning a whole new repertoire and really beginning to zone in on who's my audience and how do I best apply myself to that. So now I had to go through self-image in a whole new way. I had to think about, well, I'm not playing for audiences that are well taught. I'm playing for audiences that need to be taught. So if I'm going to do a 32-minute Beethoven sonata with a really boring slow movement, any of them that even got past the first movement, I've lost for the rest of the concert. So now I got to rethink repertoire. I got to rethink the fact that I'm in the pastor. I don't have time to practice Chopin etudes and keep them all up. What can stay in my fingers most easily? And then there were those magic times, like one time when somebody called and said, "Can you play such and such?" And I thought, yeah. There was some pop tune. And then I discovered, well, I've always been able to play by ear. Maybe that has some kind of meaning. So the bottom line is that I began to reshape my programs around what I could do instead of beating myself up like my teacher taught me to do for all the things that I knew I couldn't do. And we're not talking about here slacking off or not striving for excellence. People were calling out titles that I didn't know, and so I'd be going down to the public library on a weekly basis and checking out books, movies from the 30s, movies from the 50s, Barbra Streisand songbook, Irving Berlin songbook, I mean, all this kind of stuff, and teaching myself stuff that I didn't know. So that when they asked for something from South Pacific or they wanted something by George M. Cohan and I'd read these books and say, oh, that's from South, I knew that tune, I didn't know it was from South Pacific though. And then I began making up catalogs and stuff, so I was achieving excellence according to the gifts that I had. And there was a whole kind of new self-image thing that was taking place. And it's one of the things I love to talk about, but that kind of gets us started.
Nice.